dealing with, and I think this is what we're getting to in terms of brain-friendly social media. Our biggest challenge is information overload. We've all got too much information. All got too many interactions, but perversely, as I've talked about, we also crave more. So we're in this kind of loop of knowing that we're struggling with it, but actually engaging more. And, you know, over a third of people have already sort of said in research, I'm desperate for a digital detox. So, yeah, again, just looking at in terms of what's going on with our brain versus the human evolution of our brain versus the digital revolution. And people would love to tell you that our brains are massively changing just because we're going on Instagram. Basically, everything we've done to research that says that's rubbish. You know, the brain's an amazing thing. You know, we have 100 billion neurons firing away. We've got 70,000 thoughts, 70,000 thoughts per day. Our brain changes its structure in terms of new learning, but it can't cope with that. You know, that in terms of the rate of change of digital versus our brain going along, you know, completely pretty much static is the challenge that we need to overcome. So we did, one of the pieces of neuroscience research that we did was just to understand the challenge of shallow, particularly multi-screening. Now, this great marketing myth is that we're all sitting at home, watching the telly, we've got a tablet, we've got a smartphone, it's all going on, and we're seamlessly moving between the three, and, you know, there's an ad here, and there's a, you know, I'm on Amazon sort of looking at the ratings, and then I'm telling my mates to buy it. Sadly, that doesn't quite work when you actually research it, because it's just too much for our brain to cope with, and we're shutting down between those different screens. So when we tested it in terms of what that means in terms of brand recall, if you're watching something on telly versus multi-screening at the same time, I think it was over 90% of people had a strong brand recall when they were just single screening, whereas 31% of people had brand recall when they were multi-screening. So it is literally a third in terms of connection with brands. So I just think it's really important. That myth of multi-screening is something else that we really need to tackle. I'm coming up to my favorite chart here. It's not from my personal collection. It's not my doggy at home. Who thought a paddling dog in a paddling pool, paddling puppy? Is it a puppy? I don't know. Could help us unlock this. I think the important, so when you think about, you know, connecting with people in social media, and why do these things get sent around? Why do they connect with people? I think it's really important that we in marketing understand what's going on, because I think it's really easy to go, well, you know, dogs are cute, tick. Paddling puppy in a pool, tick. You know, next. I think, but the important thing is what's going on here neurologically. So faces have a special value for the brain in terms of we're hardwired to recognize faces because of years of connecting with humans. And they trigger a reward center in our brain. So that's what's going on while you're all getting so excited about that little puppy. But also, novel stimulus triggers dopamine. So yet again, hopefully that's the first time you've seen that kind of content. If not, I'm slightly worried about you. But yeah, again, novelty is something else you need to bring into social media, obviously. But also, there's just the whole thing about the baby face on that dog triggers a kind of caring mechanism in all of us. So tick, 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 paddling puppy. So why am I going on about that paddling puppy? Because when you get under the skin of it, we start to understand about the primal things that are going on with our brains and why that connects. And that's the biggest thing in terms of brain-friendly any content, but particularly social media. It's about targeting the primal. And I'm sure you've all read your marketing textbooks in terms of thinking fast, thinking slow. But I think that's the bit that's really important, is when we connect with people as brands, we're connecting with fast thinking. Because slow thinking is effortful, unenjoyable, so therefore the brand connection is pretty weak. when you tap into fast thinking, that's when there's the great connection, and you can actually make these shallow connections meaningful. And fast thinking is very often primal thinking, and that's the important point there. So for us, fast forward 3 years, we've done all this research, all great. I think one of the biggest challenges is, we could all sit and read neuroscience insights to the cows come on, and fascinating though it is, it's really hard to apply it when you've got a brief, a challenge, or whatever, that you've got 6 weeks to turn around on a good day. So how do you make brain-friendly? So what we've done is we've broken it down into 3 areas, which helpfully has got a bit of alliteration in there, which is also brain-friendly. So the really important thing in terms of brain-friendly creative and brain-friendly social media content is making it recognized, resonant, and relevant. And if you can tick off those 3, you're in a good place. So I'm just going to talk about being recognized, and yet again, on your marketing bookshelf, I'm sure you've all got Byron Sharp, How Brands Grow, and a lot of the thinking and the research that we've done overlaps with the research that Byron Sharp's done and summarised in there. And the most important point is key brand assets. And I think it's quite easy for people to think, oh yeah, he's just talking about make my logo bigger or make sure my logo's at the heart of it. Sadly, it's not that easy. Because I think the massive insight about key brand assets is most of us who are responsible for a brand don't know what our key brand assets are. We think we know what they are, but we don't actually know until we've quantitatively tested them. So I think really interestingly, Guinness are well known for doing some of this work, and Diageo have done a lot of that across all their brands, and tested what actually connects with people about their brand, whether it's the colorways, the logo, the word, whatever. And what I think is fascinating is you quite often find that the part of the brand armory that sits in the slow thinking piece is sometimes the words. So, with Guinness as a word is less connective than a black and white colour, is less connective than the shape of a pint, and is less connective than a harp, because that is just what Guinness have been doing for 250 years, and it's those elements that people are really hardwired to recognise. So this is a great example of once you're lucky enough to know what your key brand assets are, what you can do with them. And I think, before I talk about it, I think another really important point is it's kind of death to the logo police or the brand guardian in terms of it must have a line on the left-hand side. The people must be rose-tinted, and they must always be looking up to the sky joyously. All of that rubbish can go out the window, because actually you just need to understand what is connecting with people and what they are hardwired into your brand already, and use that intelligently. And you don't need a large binder. You just need to know what your 3 key brand assets are. So I've just made Ebby's life really easier, and I can give you a script for your logo police if you need it after this. So Guinness, I digress. So the great thing about this Guinness story is, if you know a little bit about rugby, Japan beat South Africa in the World Cup last year. On a couple of minutes to go, they could have settled for a draw, which would have been pretty historic anyway, but they pushed on and won it. So Guinness's brand positioning being about made of more, it was a great story for them to celebrate and push out in social media. So it could have been quite easy. Show the Japanese rugby team, made of more, Guinness logo, off you go. But yet again, this is using key brand assets intelligently. So it's knowing black and white, the pint, the harp, and you don't actually need to say Guinness. It means they've done a great bit of content that people get quickly, but is also creatively rewarding, because once I've recognised that as Guinness, I also then go, oh, clever, they've used the rugby team to make a pint. So it kind of works on every level. Simpler one, I don't really know the story behind Budweiser, but I think fair to say that the brand is pretty prominent. The pint is pretty prominent. But what's going on there is movement in a static environment. Now, our brains see movement as a sort of indicator of potential danger. So therefore, you're going to be recognized pretty quickly. It's also got the novelty value when you see that for the first time. So yet again, it's a piece of content that uses things that are fast and primal in our brains to connect better. Really simple one. So a video for Facebook by Radox, and it just shows you simple, brand dominant, the movement piece, the echoing of what's in the product, etc. And that is something that connects with people and we know is more effective than other things you might do that seem incredibly clever but don't get recognized. Weetabix, I don't know if you've seen this one. So yet again, sudden movement towards us gets that recognition, that awareness, because it triggers deep in here. Even a bottle of Weetabix can trigger our flight or fight response. So just having that movement and using it knowingly just makes that bit of content so much more connective, so more effective. Okay, so Aoife is going to come and join. It's Aoife, sorry.
Cool, thanks, Neil. So if the first step to brain-friendly creative is about getting that initial thumb stop, the next step is about getting people to linger. So Resonant focuses on putting feeling in the fleeting. And we can do this by using multiple senses at once to dial up emotional engagement. So sound accounts for up to 30% of an ad's effectiveness, but it still remains quite an underutilized route to consumers' emotions. We know through film that the power of sound and vision together can be really immense, but what you might not know are the neurological reasons behind that. So when we use sound and sound and visuals in sync, in a synchronized way, our brain is forced to pay more attention to that because there's more channels of our working memory engaged at the same time. And this is because there's different parts of the brain are decoding sound and visual cues. So it's not only important to make sure your sound and your visuals are in sync, it's also important to think of the peak end rule. So the peak end rule basically says that the net emotional response someone is going to have from your content is how they feel just at the very end of that and how they felt at the peak. So to translate this then for video content, what that means is that we need to keep the energy up right until the end, especially if you're going to leave the logo reveal at the end. If you trail off the audio, then people's attentions are going to trail too. So the next example I'm going to show, it's a teaser video for Beats by Dre, and you're going to see in that a really nice synchronization of the audio and the visual cues. So we have a slow fade in of the visual, synchronized with a nice sonic swell, ending in a crescendo. And it's also quite interesting to see. You'll know that the choice of music is reminiscent of kind of some sort of cinematic drama, kind of quite fitting given the place we're in today. It kind of reminds you of that THX sound before films. I don't know if any of you kind of remember that, this kind of dramatic, but again, this signals you directly to pay attention to it. You think, oh God, this is some important reveal, and you pay attention. So just a short, simple bit of content, but can be very effective on social. So we know sound is a powerful emotional messenger, but it would be stupid not to mention that we know that a lot of the time audio is not going to be heard on social. So we have to think about what else we can do. So using visual imagery and captioning in sync can also be quite effective. As Neil mentioned earlier, humans, we're wired to respond to faces, and we're also actually prone to imitate the emotion of others. So that's kind of evident if you walk down the street and you're greeted with someone with a beaming smile, you're naturally going to feel a bit happy just by looking at that happy person. We also really focus in on the eyes, and that makes sense from an evolutionary point of view because that would be a signaling of danger. One alerts the other that something's wrong by an eye gaze. So this next bit of content is an example of this. So just quite simply, the eye gaze is directing us towards a call to action. And you might just think this is just a simple visual trick that they've done, but actually what's interesting is why this is effective, because it's important to use faces in the right way or else you're kind of missing a trick. So we can't see his mouth here, but we're going to probably assume he's smiling. He's almost smizing, let's say, through his eyes. You can see there's a bit of positivity there. And so it's a very different context to us sitting here in a social media conference and dissecting this, second video, to actually the reality of where this lives. So if you think about it, on scrolling through your Instagram feed, and this catches your eye, or Facebook, I should say, and this catches your eye, this state of mind you're in then, of this continuous partial attention, might respond very differently to kind of happy blue eyes that are signaling to you. So again, it's really thinking about that we're making content not for this kind of active, rational selves. We're making content for that passive self that's usually mindlessly scrolling through Facebook. So another channel of working memory that we can engage is a sense of touch. So anyone who's ever used PlayStation or picked up a controller, crashed into a wall and felt a vibration, and felt that back, well, that's called haptic feedback, which some of you might have already heard of. And it's starting to become a reality on mobile, thanks to new video platforms that are harnessing the vibrations that are already in your phone. So what's really interesting about this is if you consider, again, we're visually bombarded, audio might not be heard, so how else can we tap into people's memories and actually engage them emotionally? And initial research on this is really, really quite promising. Like, this 85% of people say they feel more immersed in video content with a tactile effect. And this is from our partners at Eludio. So we've got that initial thumb stop. People are lingering. But how do we really make sure that people are engaged? So our attention is driven by what we value at a given time and place. And this makes sense if you think about you're walking down a high street, you're really hungry, all you can do is smell food everywhere you go. So selective attention, it's a survival skill we have because we're constantly bombarded in all of our senses. And this is well illustrated with the cocktail party effect, which you may have heard of, which is basically that in the midst of a busy cocktail environment, you'll somehow manage to hear your name be mentioned across the room, even though you're in conversation with somebody else. And although the brain can only ever focus on one thing at any time, our peripheral attention is constantly on the lookout for what might be of interest to you and of a value to us. And so this is important to play on this peripheral of attention because we're very rarely actually going to have people's undivided attention, especially on social media. So this last step for brain-friendly creative is about making content that goes with the flow of the context we're in. And we can do this by working in synergy with people and platform. So the elephant in the room here probably is pre-roll ads. Most of us probably dislike them a lot. 94% of consumers say that they actively dislike them and will press the skip button as soon as they can. And so a brand that actually, took this head on was Geico. And so a lot of you have obviously seen these already. These were this unskippable ads that won lots of awards and was very successful. And so I have this example here today just to kind of bring it to the forefront. And what was so interesting here that they delivered their brand message in those 5 seconds, so people couldn't skip. And they really tuned in to the exact pain point that people were experiencing in that moment. So as people are watching that ad, all they're doing is hovering over the skip button, but waiting to watch what they actually want to watch. And the brand, by connecting with that exact emotion, they really resonated with people. And people, obviously the campaign was very successful. It went on to have 1 million organic views within 24 hours. And then the average time spent watching it was longer than your average 30-second TV spot. It also managed to make number 4 position on the Reddit homepage, which says a lot given that mostly this is a cynical millennial audience. So I'm just going to play it for the fun. Some of you have probably already seen it, but the dog is just good banter.
Don't thank me. Thank the savings.
You can't skip this Geico ad because it's already over. Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.
And it actually keeps going. And the crazy thing is that people stayed and watched till the end, a lot of people. Cool. So another brand then winning with this relevance is Lowe's, which is an American DIY store. So I don't know about you guys, but in general, don't really like DIY. I've tried put up a couple of shelves, didn't go too well, prefer just to get the thing when it's made already. So Lowe's saw this and they tried to come up with a solution. So they used Snapchat to make DIY dead easy. And what's interesting here from a neuroscience point of view is that if we think something is going to be very difficult, but if it turns out to be very easy, we become elated, our reward centers are activated, and we become very happy with the experience. So what they did was deliver snaps in a timely, concise way, DIY instructables, but in a really interactive way. So basically you could tap along the content and actually actively engage to see a project go from start to finish. Again, by using this tapping function, you're engaging another part of your working memory, which means that you feel more compelled to stay to the end, and that meant that the drop-off rates were very low. Cool. So finally then, this is a brand taking synergy between people and platform to the next level. So like most of you, my Instagram is my holy grail. I'm going to curate everything that goes on there, and I'm going to be very, very picky about what takes up my time on my feed. So Sonic, American milkshake company, saw this and decided to actually re-engineer their whole product just for Instagram. So they changed a cylinder glass to make a cube glass, and then they hired like a food artist to make drinkable works of art. The result is that these beautiful, cubes can adorn your Instagram, and rather feeling like shoehorned in like lots of the brand content I see on Instagram, this would actually be a welcome addition. I would actually actively like and share that, and I would be appreciative of that being on my taking up my time. So they did this just in time for Coachella Festival and actually took it to the next step where you could order a milkshake through Instagram. So this is just a really nice example of a brain-friendly meeting between brand and platform. Okay, so now I'm going to pass you back to Neil, who's going to wrap up.